Mr. Thakur, Sitling, Mr. Sandhu, distinguished guests on the dais. The difficulty always on an occasion like this when you're speaking a little later in the morning is all the important statements and insights have already been revealed, and there may not be very much new to add after this. Nevertheless, I'm going to take a stab at giving a little bit of the corporate perspective with some examples from what we are trying to do in the Tata Group on this very important subject of skills development. So friends, good morning once again. This is in fact quite a timely conference. We are just about completing 1 year of the new Companies Act and the implementation of the related CSR rules. Thanks to the Act, CSR has now been elevated to the level of boards of companies through the formation of CSR committees of the board. So CSR is no longer something that is beyond business to be addressed as and when managers have time. Instead, it's now being constantly monitored and inputs are being solicited from the senior-most leadership. And as a result of this greater leadership engagement, corporates are in fact significantly revamping and refreshing their CSR programs and bringing in the discipline and rigor of measurement that would hitherto have been reserved really for business activities. And in the framework of CSR, skills development is now emerging as one of the major elements for corporate India. Now, this is in addition, as the speakers earlier noted, to the traditional business thrust which successful companies have been giving to the space. So let me first dwell a little briefly on what we are seeing taking place and why. First of all, as some of the speakers mentioned earlier, it is a self-evident truth that India is today host to the largest poor population in the world, and despite 2 decades of economic reform, including a decade of fairly rapid economic growth, a significant proportion of the population is still in the midst of poverty. And at the same time, we heard the reference about rising aspirations, particularly with around half the population under the age of 25, and the ubiquitous access to the internet and via mobile communication technology to trends and all the entertainment, the lifestyle that you see across the world. The aspirations of this young demographic is particularly increasing. And therefore, I think this combination of poverty and rising aspiration will require all of us to focus on rapid economic growth and the creation of full employment. So corporates are really confronted with this reality, and they will ignore it at their own peril and at the cost of their ability to conduct business in a predictable and secure way. So they need to pay attention to what's happening in the environment around us in India. And as the speakers earlier mentioned, we're all aware that over 100 million young people are going to enter the workforce over the next decade. Unfortunately, many of them are entering inadequately skilled or indeed without the relevant skills. And therefore, a significant focus of CSR is going to have to be from the perspective of corporate India on skills development. Now, skills development is also a useful space to focus on for corporates because it speaks to the competencies that corporate India has and indeed their requirement, their quest for talent. As India grows and becomes one of the major workshops of the world, with a welcome focus on Make in India, there will be a growing need for skills across the board, ranging from the very basic to the highly sophisticated. And so it's in the interests of corporates to groom the kind of talent that they will need to absorb in order to become globally competitive. And the good news is, as we just heard, the government is lending its support both at the center and in the states. And at the center, of course, this has been reflected in the creation of the Ministry for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and bringing on board the National Skill Development Agency, the National Skills Development Corporation, the Directorate of Employment and Training, the ITIs, the Apprentice Program. Bringing all of this under one head, I think, is going to deliver greater efficiency in policy making and in implementation. Now, a major development of the cards, we saw a reference to that in the last presentation, is the fast tracking of the National Skills Qualification Framework, which aims to create the equivalence of qualifications making upward and lateral mobility possible between mainstream and vocational education. And I have to say, the government has introduced a number of schemes that offer industrial internships and financial support for skills development, particularly for underprivileged groups. We've seen this under the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. We've seen it under the National Rural Livelihood Mission. There are schemes for vulnerable tribal groups. There are schemes for people with disabilities, and so on. And I think increasingly, a lot of us in the corporate world are trying to leverage the potential of these schemes to address multiple agendas, including diversity, inclusion, and of course, skills development. So let me make some brief observations on some of the trends that we are seeing in the skills development space. The first, and I think this is a very welcome sign for corporate India, is collaboration. I think enterprising corporates are taking the view that since they are in any case building the capacity, they may as well ensure that this is fully utilized. So they do this by offering spare capacity for skills development to other corporates, to foundations, to high net worth individuals, all of whom can pool their funds and support ongoing skills development projects. At Tata's, we're doing something similar. We've created a skills development program which we branded Tata Strive, where we are trying to create the capacity to scale several lakh young people each year. And this capacity we're trying to spread across a network of centers, some controlled by our companies, some that are run by non-profits, and of course leveraging the Industrial Training Institute or ITIs of the central and state governments. The second trend that we are seeing is the emergence of new social enterprises. Managerial insights and the application of a business lens to skills development is, I think, unveiling business opportunities for many entrepreneurs. And this is reflected in the increasing number of social enterprise activities around skills development, some for profit, some not for profit. The third trend is really the focus on both basic and, as I mentioned earlier, premium skills. And I think both are going to be particularly important. At the Tata Group, for instance, on the construction side of many of our companies' activity, we are seeing a need for basic trades, carpenter, welder, electrician. And at the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, we are seeing the need for talent in areas like aerospace engineering. We have a company, Tata Advanced Systems Limited, which is in the aerospace sector. They've created an advanced craftsmanship center, which is now benchmarked some of the best training institutes worldwide. They have a structured training program which lasts 9 months and creates world-class skilled mechanics out of fresh apprentices taken from the ITIs. Now, these are young people who probably never before in their life have even seen an aircraft up close. They've been enrolled in this course. They've received training in aerostructures, assembly, aerospace programming, which are very high precision jobs. Similarly, we are seeing across corporate India a need in sectors like oil exploration, precision engineering, medical imaging, radiology, and so on. Looking ahead, what would be some of the important developments that we need to anticipate? I think many of these were referred to in the last presentation. The first that I'd like to pick out is the impact of information technology. I think we can already see the huge impact that productivity increase through automation and widespread access to the internet will have on the nature of available jobs. So the skills that are being imparted need to be appropriately designed for such a future. And in particular, the need to expose our young people very early on to the power of information technology. The second is the need to equip individuals with traits and skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, social skills, persistence, creativity, self-control. These are skills that you require to allow you to function and contribute meaningfully to society and to succeed both in public life and in the workplace and at home. So there is really, I think, a need to focus on the development of non-cognitive skills and soft skills. And a large part of the focus in Tata's and Tata Strive is actually on those kinds of skills. A third development that we're seeing in the skills development space, both from the perspective of the government and for much of the organized sector now, is that particular attention is increasingly being paid to the needs of the micro, small and medium enterprises, the MSMEs. 2/3 of these are involved in the manufacturing sector and many serve as feeder organizations for larger companies. So efforts aimed at enhancing the skill sets of workers in MSMEs will automatically translate into a better quality of supplies for larger companies. So a strategy which could be of relevance is the funding of apprentices for MSMEs, either by the government or through companies pooling their CSR budgets, particularly in the wake of the Apprenticeship Act amendments. It would be meaningful also to offer entrepreneurship modules to support the MSME owners. Though increasingly, I think we have to be aware that not all candidates have the same kind of aptitude for entrepreneurship. And programs, I think, can be significantly better targeted by testing the aptitude of candidates to get into entrepreneurship. The fourth development we're seeing is the creation of pathways between industry and the academic world to encourage the flow of knowledge, ideas, research, and technologies. Now, this has been happening for a long time with professional courses, MBAs, engineers, and so on. But I think there is great scope now to increase the partnership for all other streams for regular college students to enable an early understanding and engagement with industry. Colleges must actively reach out to local industry to explore such partnerships, and industry itself can and should contribute through employee volunteering, where practitioners can share experiences. This is something I think in the IT sector, India has done very well, and it's a fairly mature model that can be extended to other verticals as well. There are, of course, significant possibilities for joint research between academia and industry. TCS has done this very successfully, for instance, in developing simulators for welders, for drivers, for heavy machinery operators, which are being leveraged now by training providers across the country. Incubation labs in the IITs and the IIMs could also focus on business models and technologies that impact the skills ecosystem. Finally, and as I end, a comment that was made earlier, one hopes that there will be a shift in the way in India we perceive the social value of work and what defines a successful career and a successful life. I think what is needed is an awakening to the intrinsic value of human capital and a deeper respect for the dignity of labor. So conferences like the one today, the discussions that you will have in the course of the day, and some of the panel discussions, I think, are really going to focus on some of these aspects. So once again, to the organizers of the conference and to all of you, my compliments for being here and for shining a light on this very important subject. Thank you very much.